The sky above Earth was clear. It was just another peaceful day. People were going about their business, oblivious to the horrors that would soon unfold. The world had become complacent, believing that humanity had reached a point where it could no longer be touched, where no enemy would ever threaten it again. But that belief was shattered in an instant. Without warning, a massive alien fleet appeared in the skies, their ships dark and imposing. They were unlike anything humanity had ever seen before. The ships were so vast, they blocked out the sun, casting long, menacing shadows across the earth. Cities below went quiet as people looked up, some in awe, others in terror. What was this? Was it a sign of peace or an invasion? The first few moments were filled with uncertainty, but it didn't take long for the truth to become clear. The alien ships didn't come to negotiate. They didn't come with offers of peace or trade. They came with one thing in mind: humanity's extinction. As the fleet settled into orbit above Earth, a single ship released a transmission. It was broadcast across every communication channel. The voice that came through was cold and emotionless, yet it echoed with an authority that sent chills down the spines of every listener. This is the Illyrian Dominion. Your world is now ours. Your species has been found wanting. This is your final warning. Cease all resistance or face total eradication. The words hit humanity like a lightning bolt. Governments scrambled to respond, but the aliens had anticipated every move. Earth's best defense systems, the very ones that had been designed to defend against such a threat, were useless. The enemy ships had technology far beyond anything humanity could imagine, their weapons far too powerful to be countered. In a matter of minutes, Earth's satellites were taken out, leaving the planet blind to what was coming. The alien forces did not wait for a second warning. Without hesitation, they began their assault. A single devastating beam of energy struck New York City. It was as if the sun itself had come down to Earth. The blast leveled the entire skyline, turning millions of lives into nothing but ash in a heartbeat. There was no time to escape. The devastation was so sudden that the city's screams were silenced before they even had a chance to be heard. As the world watched in horror, similar strikes began to rain down across the globe. Paris, London, Tokyo, and other major cities faced the same fate. Entire populations were wiped off the face of the earth in a matter of hours. The alien fleet seemed unstoppable, their technology far superior to anything humanity had ever created. Earth's leaders watched helplessly from bunkers, unable to even communicate with the outside world as their nations crumbled under the weight of the invasion. The survivors, scattered in small groups around the world, began to realize the scale of what was happening. This was no longer just an attack, it was genocide. The aliens weren't interested in conquering Earth. They weren't even interested in resources. They were here to erase humanity, to wipe out every trace of the human race from existence. This was a planned, cold-blooded massacre. In the aftermath of the first wave, a small group of military leaders and scientists gathered in an underground command center. Their faces were grim, their minds racing for a solution. But there was no easy answer. The alien ships had already destroyed Earth's military forces in the blink of an eye. The few remaining forces were scattered, uncoordinated, and ill-prepared. The world was in chaos. There were no alliances, no unity. The survivors were left with nothing but their will to survive, and that alone was not enough against an enemy so far beyond them. The situation grew darker by the minute. As the last few remaining survivors in the command center debated, a chilling realization hit them. The aliens were not going to stop. They had no reason to stop. Earth was being erased, and unless humanity did something drastic, it would be over. One of the scientists, a young woman named Dr. Evelyn Carter, spoke up, her voice shaking but determined. "We need to fight back," she said. "We may be weak now, but we have technology. We have resources hidden away that the aliens haven't found. We can't just let them wipe us out." The others were silent, their faces worn with the weight of failure. But Dr. Carter's words struck a spark in them. They realized that if they had any hope at all, it was in unity. The world had to come together. Earth's people had to rise from the ashes and make their stand, no matter the cost. The room was filled with a mix of fear and determination as they began to put their plan together. There was no longer time for hesitation, no room for cowardice. Earth was not going down without a fight, no matter how hopeless it seemed. But as they prepared to launch their counteroffensive, the skies above Earth held more terror. The alien fleet had begun to send down their ground forces, heavily armored, monstrous creatures who were the physical embodiment of their species' cruelty. As these alien soldiers began to march across the planet, it became clear the fight for humanity's survival was just beginning. Yet, as humanity looked up at the towering alien forces, one thought burned in their minds. Enough was enough. No longer would they sit idly by as their world was destroyed. Earth was going to fight back. It didn't matter if they had the odds stacked against them. Humanity would never give up, and they would never go down without a fight. The real battle had just begun. The news spread like wildfire. As the smoke from the devastated cities cleared, and the skies remained darkened by the hovering alien ships, humanity began to stir. The initial shock of the attack had given way to something far more dangerous: rage. People who had once believed that Earth was too insignificant to be noticed by the stars now realized that their very existence was under threat. There would be no negotiation, no compromise, only survival or extinction. In the underground command center, the leaders of the world gathered. The air was thick with the weight of their decision. Earth's governments, once fragmented and divided, had no choice but to come together. They had no resources left to fight amongst themselves. The aliens had made that choice for them. Their forces, which had once been divided by national borders, now saw themselves united by a singular goal: survival. But survival wasn't enough. They knew the aliens had far superior technology. Their weapons were beyond anything humanity could have imagined. The first wave of attacks had shown that conventional military tactics were useless. The alien ships had swept through Earth's defenses like a storm, effortlessly erasing any attempt to resist. The next question was whether humanity had any hope at all, or if they were already doomed. Dr. Evelyn Carter stood at the front of the room, the only scientist among the military and political leaders. Her eyes, though tired, burned with determination. "We're not just going to survive this," she said, her voice clear and strong. "We're going to make them pay." The room fell silent. For the first time, there was no argument, no one questioning the impossible. They knew she was right. If humanity was to survive, they couldn't just hide. They needed to strike back, and strike hard. In the days that followed, the survivors worked around the clock. Using whatever resources they could gather from the remnants of their fallen cities, they began to salvage Earth's remaining weapons technology. They were on the verge of desperation, but they had one advantage. The aliens underestimated them. They saw humanity as a primitive species, incapable of mounting a significant resistance. That mistake would cost them dearly. Dr. Carter, along with a group of brilliant engineers and scientists, began to work on a new weapon, something capable of matching the alien forces. It wasn't much, but it was something. They called it Phoenix Strike. It was an experimental device, still in its infancy, designed to harness the power of Earth's remaining nuclear arsenals and concentrate it into a single devastating pulse. They didn't have much time to refine it, but it was humanity's only chance. Meanwhile, across the world, the few remaining military forces made their move. They gathered in hidden bases, preparing to launch guerrilla-style resistance operations. These small, uncoordinated groups were Earth's last line of defense, and they were ready to fight to the death. They knew the chances of winning were slim, but they had no other choice. The alien army was relentless, and humanity's only hope was to delay them long enough to complete the Phoenix Strike. The first counterattack came from a small group of soldiers in the ruins of Chicago. Their objective was simple: destroy one of the alien ground units and buy time. The soldiers moved in carefully, using the remains of buildings and debris to hide their movements. The alien forces, though technologically advanced, were not invincible. They had been programmed to expect easy victories, not resistance from a species they thought was finished. The humans fought with everything they had, throwing homemade explosives, using whatever weapons they could find, and doing whatever they could to sabotage the alien ground units. It was a desperate, bloody fight, but it was their first victory. The alien unit was destroyed, and though it came at the cost of most of the human soldiers, it sent a message to the aliens. Humanity was not going down without a fight. Back at the command center, Dr. Carter and her team had finally completed the Phoenix Strike's first phase. It was a crude version, but it was enough to do some serious damage. They sent out a signal to Earth's remaining forces, coordinating a series of counterattacks across the globe. The plan was risky, but it was the only plan they had. If they could get enough of the Phoenix Strike's energy into the alien motherships, they might have a chance. As Earth's military forces carried out the counterattacks, the aliens responded with force. Their retaliation was swift and brutal. Entire cities were wiped off the map in minutes, leaving no survivors. But with each passing hour, humanity gained ground. They discovered weaknesses in the alien armor, flaws in their communication networks, and chinks in their seemingly invincible fleets. The more they fought, the more they learned, and the more they realized. The aliens had made a huge mistake. They had underestimated humanity's will to fight. Dr. Carter's team had been working tirelessly, and finally, the Phoenix Strike was ready for its first real test. Earth's last remaining warships, barely functional but filled with determination, were the only ones capable of delivering the weapon. As they launched into the sky, the world watched with bated breath. The final battle had begun. But as the first wave of warships closed in on the alien mothership, the enemy responded with a new weapon, an energy shield that rendered their weapons useless. The human ships were being torn apart one by one. Desperation began to set in again. The Phoenix Strike was their only hope, but they were running out of time. In a last-ditch effort, Dr. Carter made a bold suggestion. If the warships couldn't break through the shields, they would have to use a different approach. They would launch the Phoenix Strike manually from the ground, using the remnants of Earth's remaining nuclear arsenals. As the alien forces pressed on, the survivors rallied around this new risky plan. They had one shot, one chance to stop the aliens from wiping them out completely. As the survivors gathered their strength, they braced themselves for what would come next. Humanity's fury was only just beginning. They had been pushed to the brink, but they were far from defeated. And as the final attack was launched, the entire world held its breath, waiting for the outcome that would determine the future of humanity. Would they fall, or would they rise? The countdown to humanity's most desperate counteroffensive had begun. Across the globe, survivors had been fighting tooth and nail, pushing the alien invaders back inch by inch. But time was running out. The aliens, though seemingly unbeatable, had underestimated one key factor: humanity's unwavering will to survive. As the Phoenix Strike neared completion, hope began to flicker once again. Dr. Evelyn Carter stood at the front of the control room, eyes fixed on the holographic map of Earth. Her mind was racing, processing data from all over the world. The alien forces were everywhere, and humanity's last warships were quickly being overwhelmed. But the Phoenix Strike, it was their one true weapon, their last hope. There was no room for error, no second chances. "I'm ready," said Dr. Carter, her voice steady despite the storm of uncertainty inside her. "Let's do this." A tense silence filled the room as the team of engineers and military personnel worked tirelessly to set the weapon into motion. They had spent days, weeks, maybe even months preparing for this moment, and now it was here. Every second felt like an eternity. The Phoenix Strike was humanity's greatest chance at survival, but it was still untested, and failure meant complete annihilation. With a soft hum, The warship's engines roared to life, and the first of the attack ships launched from the underground base. The fleet was small, too small to take on the full alien armada. But they had one advantage: the element of surprise. The aliens expected the Earth to break, to cower under their overwhelming might. But the humans had no intention of giving up. This time, they were going to show the aliens exactly what they were capable of. The human ships made their way toward the alien motherships, cutting through the atmosphere with precision. The alien ships loomed in the sky, massive and menacing, their weapons glowing as they prepared to crush the last resistance on Earth. The humans knew they were outmatched, but there was no turning back. It was now or never. Dr. Carter watched the monitors, her eyes darting between the displays of incoming alien ships and the Phoenix Strike's countdown timer. Every second felt like a lifetime. She could feel the weight of the world pressing down on her. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about sending a message that humanity would never bow down, that no matter how dark the days became, they would always fight to protect their home. Then it happened. The first alien blast struck one of the human warships. The ship exploded in a massive burst of light, disintegrating into nothingness. It was a devastating loss, but it didn't break the spirit of the remaining forces. If anything, it fueled their rage. The survivors pushed forward, their desperation turning into something more powerful: determination. "Launch the Phoenix Strike," Dr. Carter ordered. The final phase had begun. The Phoenix Strike's energy core was activated, and a wave of raw, concentrated power surged toward the alien ships. The massive energy beam shot from the ground, targeting the alien motherships in orbit. For a moment, it seemed like the beam would miss. But then, with a blinding flash, the energy struck its target. The alien motherships shuddered. For the first time, humanity had inflicted real damage. The alien shields flickered as the concentrated blast tore through their defenses. It wasn't enough to destroy them, but it was enough to send a clear message: humanity was still fighting. But the aliens were quick to retaliate. Their response was immediate and brutal. One of the largest alien ships fired a devastating energy beam straight toward Earth. The beam cut through the atmosphere like a hot knife through butter, aiming for the control center. Dr. Carter and her team watched in horror as the beam drew closer, knowing there was no way to stop it. For a moment, time seemed to slow down. The energy beam grew closer and closer, and the whole room was filled with the sound of alarms blaring. Dr. Carter's heart raced. There was no escape. But just as the beam was about to strike, a sudden explosion ripped through the alien ship's hull. The ship lurched, its weapons faltering. Who did that? Someone shouted, but no one could answer. It didn't matter. The beam had missed. The humans looked up in shock as the screen displayed an unexpected sight. A small group of rebel ships, led by soldiers from across the world, had launched their own attack on the alien fleet. They had managed to slip through the cracks, infiltrating the aliens' defensive perimeter and dealing a powerful blow. It was a miracle, and it gave the humans the opening they needed. "Now's our chance," Dr. Carter shouted, a spark of hope lighting in her eyes. "Get to the Phoenix Strike's final position. We need to hit them hard before they regroup." The remaining human warships pushed forward, their weapons charging once more as the Phoenix Strike neared its final moment. The enemy ships were in disarray, their once impenetrable defenses weakened by the earlier blast. With their shields down, they were vulnerable like never before. But the aliens weren't going to go down without a fight. They had one last weapon left: the doomsday device that could completely destroy Earth. The device was already activating. The countdown had begun, and with it, humanity's final hope was slipping away. The alien motherships began to converge on the final position of the Phoenix Strike, prepared to obliterate everything in their path. The humans had one final option. They could take the fight to the heart of the alien fleet, get close enough to deliver the finishing blow, knowing full well it might cost them everything. It was the only way to stop the countdown. The remaining ships charged forward, their weapons primed for one last desperate attack. The final battle was about to begin, and the fate of humanity rested on the shoulders of those brave enough to face the aliens head-on. They had nothing left to lose. This was it. They would either succeed and reclaim their world, or they would be obliterated. You said. The tension in the air was palpable as humanity's last warships prepared for the final assault. Earth's very existence hung in the balance, and the survivors knew this was the moment that would define their future, or end it. The alien motherships loomed like dark, impenetrable monoliths in the sky, casting shadows over the shattered remains of cities below. Their weapons charged, their doomsday device ticking down, ready to wipe out the last of humanity. But humanity was far from finished. Dr. Evelyn Carter stood beside the control panel, sweat dripping down her face. Her eyes were fixed on the countdown clock ticking down on the screen. Every second felt like a lifetime. She glanced at the warship fleet outside the underground command center. They were ready, but even as she stared, she knew the odds. The alien motherships were still too powerful, their weaponry too advanced. But they had one advantage: human ingenuity. "We've come too far to back down now," she muttered under her breath. "Ready when you are, Dr. Carter," came a voice from behind her. It was Captain Harper, the commander of Earth's last warship, the Vigilance. He was one of the few survivors from the initial attack and had fought every step of the way to get here. His face, like everyone else's, was hard and determined. He didn't look afraid. He couldn't afford to. "Launch the final strike," Dr. Carter ordered, her voice resolute despite the chaos swirling in her chest. "Do whatever it takes. We either win this or we die trying." The crew of the Vigilance and the other warships scrambled into action, engaging in a deadly dance with the alien fleet. They had one goal: reach the heart of the enemy's forces and stop the countdown before it was too late. Their movements were precise and coordinated, even if they had no idea whether it would work. The alien ships opened fire, their weapons blazing with destructive energy, but the humans maneuvered skillfully, weaving between the beams of fire, avoiding the deadly blasts with calculated precision. "Hold steady," Captain Harper called out over the comms, his voice unwavering. "Keep your course. We need to get close enough." Every moment was a race against time. As the warships surged forward, the alien ships fired relentlessly, their beams tearing through the air. The ground below quaked with each blast, and the sky seemed to burn with the intensity of their fury. Yet the humans pushed forward, their hearts beating in unison, driven by the thought that if they failed, humanity would be no more. The countdown clock on the screen ticked down mercilessly. 45 seconds. 40 seconds. 30 seconds. The Vigilance and its fleet darted into the heart of the alien armada, dodging energy blasts that seemed to come from every direction. The air was thick with the tension of the final moments. With every passing second, the gap between the humans and the alien motherships narrowed. They were getting closer, but the risk was higher than ever. A single misstep could mean the end. Then it happened. A sudden explosion erupted from one of the alien ships, causing a chain reaction that tore through the fleet. The humans didn't have the luxury of celebrating, though. They were almost there. As the Vigilance and the remaining warships approached, their targeting systems locked on to the alien motherships. They would strike the core, the heart of the invasion, and hope it was enough to cripple the fleet. "Lock onto the central core," Dr. Carter shouted, her voice trembling with a mix of fear and adrenaline. "We need to stop their doomsday device now." But the aliens were not blind to the human assault. They activated their final line of defense, a massive, energy-charged shield that surrounded the motherships. The shield rippled with terrifying power, and the human warships were forced to stop, unable to penetrate it. Panic set in for a brief moment. The countdown was almost at zero, and they were too far away to reach the core. "We're not going to make it," Captain Harper shouted, his voice filled with frustration. But Dr. Carter refused to give up. She had one last card to play. She knew it was dangerous, maybe even suicidal, but it was the only option left. Without hesitation, she reached for the emergency override switch. It was a protocol meant for moments just like this, a fail-safe that would allow the warships to detonate their remaining payloads manually. "Prepare for a manual detonation," Dr. Carter said, her words cutting through the chaos. "This is our last chance." The crew of the Vigilance quickly scrambled to reconfigure their weapons, bypassing the shields that had stopped their initial attack. They would use their remaining power for a direct strike, risking everything. There was no guarantee it would work, but it was their only hope. As the seconds continued to tick away, the Vigilance dove directly into the heart of the alien fleet. They were about to face the full brunt of the alien firepower, but they had no other choice. The Vigilance's hull groaned as the ship took hit after hit, but it kept moving forward. The engines were on the verge of failure, and the crew knew this would be their final mission. "Now," Dr. Carter shouted. The manual detonation was set. With a surge of power, the ship released the full force of its weapons in a concentrated blast. The core of the alien mothership, its central control system, was directly hit, sending shockwaves through the enemy fleet. A blinding explosion erupted, lighting up the sky like a second sun. The alien shield was shattered, and the motherships began to destabilize. For a moment, the entire world seemed to stop. The humans held their breath, watching as the alien fleet shook, its massive ships crumbling under the force of the explosion. But it wasn't over. As the final moments ticked away, the countdown clock for the alien doomsday device reached 0. In a final act of desperation, the aliens triggered the device, but the blast was nowhere near as powerful as they had hoped. The Phoenix Strike, humanity's final weapon, had weakened the core, and with the motherships in chaos, the blast only consumed the remaining ships, turning the skies into a kaleidoscope of fiery destruction. Humanity had won. The remaining alien ships were nothing more than debris, floating lifelessly in the atmosphere. The countdown had ended, and with it, the threat of total annihilation. But the cost was immense. The Vigilance and the other warships had been lost. The survivors, those few who were still alive, knew they had won a hard-fought victory, but they also knew that Earth would never be the same again. The war was over, but the scars left by the alien invasion would never fade. Humanity had made its stand, and against all odds, they had prevailed. The victory was hard-earned, but it was theirs. Earth's skies, once darkened by the looming alien motherships, were now clear again. The air, filled with the acrid scent of burning debris and the stench of destruction, was slowly starting to clear. The alien invasion was over. The fleet had been decimated, the doomsday device neutralized. But while humanity had won, the cost was unimaginable. The ruins of cities that had once thrived now lay in smoldering heaps. The death toll was staggering. Millions upon millions had perished in the wake of the alien assault. And though the warships had managed to deliver the final blow, they too were lost, along with the brave men and women who had manned them. The Vigilance, once a symbol of humanity's last hope, now floated as a silent grave in space, its mission completed but its crew gone. Back on Earth, the survivors, those who had escaped the immediate devastation, gathered in what remained of the command centers. The world's major cities had been reduced to ruins, and infrastructure had collapsed entirely. There were no more grand governments or vast organizations. The power structures had been shattered. But as Dr. Evelyn Carter and the handful of surviving leaders met, one thing was certain: humanity had survived. The question was, what now? Dr. Carter's eyes, heavy with exhaustion, looked out over the horizon from the makeshift command post they had created in what was once a thriving metropolis. The city was now just a ghost of its former self. Smoke rose from the wreckage of what had once been a proud symbol of humanity's progress. Yet in the midst of it all, the people of Earth stood tall. The survivors of the war, Those who had managed to stay hidden, those who had fought until their last breath, and those who had taken part in the defense efforts were gathered here. There were no flags waving, no celebrations, only the solemn recognition of their shared ordeal. The cost of this victory had been far higher than anyone could have imagined. "Dr. Carter," said Captain Harper, his voice gravelly but resolute. He was one of the few who had survived, his body battered but his spirit unbroken. "We did it. We stopped them." Dr. Carter nodded but said nothing. The weight of their victory, and the enormous losses they had suffered, sat heavily on her shoulders. "Yes," she said quietly, "we stopped them. But what comes next?" For a long time, no one spoke. The truth was, no one really knew. The Earth was broken, its population decimated, and much of its technology had been lost in the battle. The Phoenix Strike, humanity's most powerful weapon, had taken out the alien motherships, but at the cost of their final warships. The cities lay in ruins, and there was no easy path forward. Then, from among the crowd of survivors, a voice spoke out. It was young, yet filled with an incredible amount of resolve. "We rebuild," said a young woman, no older than 25. Her name was Amelia, a former engineer who had been part of the resistance, and one of the few survivors from a small group that had managed to escape an alien strike in London. "We rebuild, together. We learn from this. We rise stronger." Her words cut through the air like a spark igniting a fire. People turned toward her, faces hard with determination. They were weary, they were beaten, but they were alive. And for the first time since the invasion had begun, they felt something new, hope. Amelia was right. They had lost everything, but that didn't mean they were done. "We rebuild," Dr. Carter repeated, her voice gaining strength. "Not just the cities, not just our homes. We rebuild humanity itself. We show them, show the universe, that Earth will never bend, never break, and never surrender." A murmur of agreement swept through the survivors. Though they had lost nearly everything, they still had each other, and they still had their will to fight. In the days that followed, humanity began the long and difficult process of rebuilding. They scavenged what remained of their cities and their technologies, using the scraps to reassemble the world they had once known. With the help of the few remaining engineers, scientists, and military leaders, they began to craft new systems of defense, preparing in case the aliens, or anyone else, decided to come back. Dr. Carter and Captain Harper worked tirelessly alongside the new global leadership that had emerged from the ashes. There were no more borders, no more nations dividing them. The war had forced humanity to come together, to fight as one, and they intended to stay that way. Their goal now wasn't just to survive, but to ensure that they would never be caught off guard again. The world slowly began to heal. It wasn't easy, and there were many setbacks, but the survivors were determined. As the years passed, new technologies were developed, not just for survival, but to prevent any future catastrophe. The war had changed humanity forever, but it had also given them a new understanding of the strength they were capable of when they united. And the universe was watching. Far beyond the edges of the solar system, in distant corners of the galaxy, the alien invaders who had once thought they could easily crush humanity were left with a bitter lesson. They had underestimated Earth's resilience, its ability to fight back, and most of all, its will to survive. But Earth was not the only world in the universe, and the question now was, what would happen next? As humanity rebuilt, they knew one thing for sure. They had earned their place among the stars. They had faced the ultimate test, and they had passed. The aliens had made one fatal mistake. They had underestimated humanity. But that mistake had cost them everything. The final battle had been won. But the war for the future of the galaxy was just beginning. Humanity had sent its message loud and clear: never underestimate Earth. And in the stars, the universe was listening. As the years passed, humanity's rebuilding efforts continued, but the world would never return to its pre-invasion state. The scars of the war were deep, not just on the earth, but in the hearts and minds of those who had survived. The war had changed them in ways they were only beginning to understand. The fear of extinction had bonded the survivors in a way nothing else could. The dream of a united Earth, one where every country worked together for the common good, had become a reality, forged through fire and blood. Dr. Evelyn Carter had become one of the leading figures of the New World Order, not because of her military achievements, but because of her unwavering belief in humanity's potential. She had led the charge in developing the new weapons systems that helped protect Earth from any future threats. Her knowledge of the Phoenix Strike, the weapon that had turned the tide of the war, had made her the cornerstone of Earth's defense. However, as the months turned into years, she felt an uneasy stirring deep within her. The alien fleet had been defeated, yes, but had they truly eradicated the threat, or had they just forced it to evolve? Captain Harper, now a seasoned general in Earth's military, had grown into a leader admired by the survivors. Together, he and Dr. Carter had formed the backbone of Earth's resistance during the war, and now they were key figures in ensuring humanity's security. Yet even Harper, with all his hard-earned wisdom, had become increasingly uneasy. There were whispers in the shadows, rumors that something darker, something more powerful, was coming. The universe, they feared, would not let Earth's victory go unchallenged. The Galactic Council, formed in the aftermath of the war, now represented the growing number of species who had aligned themselves with humanity, drawn by the courage and determination Earth had shown. At first, the Council's meetings had been diplomatic, and the humans had embraced their newfound allies, hoping to rebuild a galaxy that had once been ruled by fear. But soon, tension began to rise. There were those among the stars who still saw humanity's victory as a threat. The way Earth had destroyed the alien motherships, the way the Phoenix Strike had torn through their armadas, it had rattled even the most powerful galactic empires. "We are being watched," Captain Harper said one evening, staring at the stars from the window of the command room in the newly rebuilt Earth Defense Headquarters. "And we're not the only ones who know it. The other species out there, they're not happy. Earth is too powerful now. We've crossed a line we can't uncross." Dr. Carter nodded silently. It wasn't the first time she had considered this. Every new alliance, every new species that joined the Galactic Council had their own motivations. And though Earth had built many powerful friendships, there were still old wounds between the stars. The human strength, their unexpected ability to fight back, had made them a target. "We made a lot of enemies during the war," Dr. Carter said softly. "And enemies don't forget. I just can't shake the feeling that we're in the calm before the storm." The next few weeks were filled with tense meetings, intelligence reports, and the constant hum of military readiness. The Galactic Council itself was fracturing. Not every species had agreed to join forces with Earth after the war. The alliances had been formed out of necessity, not friendship, and not all of them had survived the test of time. Earth's victory had pushed many species to reconsider their allegiances, but there was one species whose name had been whispered by the most powerful forces in the galaxy, a name that sent chills down the spines of those who knew it: the Caterans. The Caterans were an ancient species, feared across the galaxy for their intelligence, their ruthlessness, and their unparalleled technological advancements. They had been watching Earth from the shadows, and their presence was no coincidence. The Caterans had always believed that the universe was a place for the strong to dominate. Earth's victory over the alien invaders, the way humanity had pushed back against overwhelming odds, this had been seen as a challenge to their worldview. "They're coming," whispered Admiral Forsyth, one of Earth's top commanders, after receiving a distress signal from an ally planet near the edge of the galaxy. "The Caterans are mobilizing." That was the moment everything changed. Earth's fragile peace was shattered in an instant. The Caterans had arrived, their fleet descending upon Earth faster than anyone could have predicted. The warships were massive, their technology advanced beyond anything humanity had seen. They didn't bother with diplomacy or warnings. They came to take what they wanted. The peace they had fought for, the unity they had forged. It was all about to come crashing down. As Earth's defense systems flared to life, the Kitaran fleet loomed in the sky like a storm cloud, casting a long shadow over the shattered planet. This time, there would be no surprise. There would be no last-minute miracle. The Phoenix Strike, Earth's greatest weapon, had been used to its limit in the last battle. And now it was nothing more than a memory. The Galactic Council had split into factions. Some believed Earth should face the Kitarans alone. Others argued for diplomacy. But Earth had no time for negotiations. The Kitarans had already begun their bombardment, and every moment was a countdown to Earth's destruction. Dr. Carter watched the stars from her observation deck, her mind racing. This time, they weren't facing an alien fleet that underestimated them. The Kitarans were no fools. They knew humanity's strength, but they were determined to break it, to remind Earth that they were not welcome in this galaxy, no matter what they had accomplished. "We have to do something," Dr. Carter muttered, staring into the abyss. "We can't let them destroy everything we fought for." She turned to Harper, who was pacing behind her. "What do we have left? We've used the last of our weapons. We're running out of time." Harper stopped pacing, his eyes cold and sharp. "Then we do what we've always done. We fight. We fight until we have nothing left." And so, with the Kitarans' fleet closing in, humanity faced its greatest test yet. Would they survive this new threat, or would the Kitarans finally break them? The fate of Earth hung in the balance once more. But there was one thing the Kitarans had underestimated: humanity's resilience. They had underestimated Earth's will to survive. And this time, Earth wasn't just fighting for survival. Earth was fighting to prove that their place in the galaxy was earned, not given, and they would fight to the last to protect it.